The story starts with a lovely lady named Hannah, who teaches English to kids in a fun way. All her students really like her, because she's both beautiful and kind. Surprisingly, Hannah doesn't have a boyfriend, even though she's pretty and in good shape. One day, her friend Kaya came to see her and needed some help. Kaya wanted to go back to the United States and break up with her boyfriend. The problem was, Kaya wasn't very good at speaking Thai, and her boyfriend didn't know any English. So they often had trouble understanding each other. That's when Kaya asked Hannah for a favor. She wanted Hannah to tell her boyfriend that she wanted to end their relationship. At first, Hannah said no, but when Kaya offered her an expensive bag as a gift, Hannah agreed to help. Kaya then arranged for Hannah to meet her boyfriend Jim, who works as a technician at a coffee shop. There, Hannah tried to translate what Kaya had recorded in Thai and explain it to Jim. But when Jim heard Kaya's voice recording in Hannah's translation, he got really angry and thought Hannah was lying. He believed that Kaya couldn't end their relationship, so he left Hannah, leaving her surprised and upset because she was just trying to help her friend. Later that night, as Hannah was closing up her English course in a shopping center, she discovered that someone had messed with her banner. The place was dark and quiet, which made her scared. She hurried to the parking area to go home. However, when she got there, she was chased by someone on a motorcycle. She ran in fear, but the person caught up with her and blocked her path. It turned out to be Jim, and he forced Hannah to teach him English. He wanted to learn so that he could follow Kaya to the United States and be with her. Jim gave Hannah some money as course fees and then left. In short, Jim began taking English lessons with Hannah at a coffee shop. Since Jim had never studied English before, Hannah started by teaching him common vocabulary used in everyday life and basic conversations. Jim wanted to give Hannah a ride home, but she said no because she found Jim's words to be impolite. The following day, while Hannah was teaching a business class, one of her students, a guy named Phil, openly expressed his feelings for her. Hannah was surprised to see Phil improving his English and public speaking skills and realized she had feelings for him. In the evening, Hannah met up with Jim at the coffee shop for their English lesson. They had a small incident with a group of troublemaking students who took inappropriate photos of Hannah secretly. Jim stood up for Hannah and made sure the troublemakers learned a lesson. One day, Hannah bumped into Jim while he was buying an English book. Shortly after, some foreign tourists asked Jim for directions in English. Jim felt confused and told them to ask someone else before hurriedly leaving. Later that evening, Hannah received a text message from Phil inviting her to a party next week. She was thrilled and accepted the invitation because she really liked Phil. Meanwhile, Jim received a gift from Kaya, which was the ring he had given her. This gesture signaled that Kaya wanted to end their romantic relationship. The next day, Jim gave the ring to Hannah and asked her to give it back to Kaya. When Hannah told her friend about this, Kaya got upset because she thought Hannah should have helped her break up with Jim, not try to fix their relationship. This left Hannah feeling conflicted because she also felt sorry for Jim. With heavy heart, Hannah decided to stop teaching English to Jim and returned the money he had paid for the lessons. Jim felt really disappointed and hopeless. Before leaving, he came up to Hannah in the parking area and tossed the money onto her windshield. As Hannah was about to pick up the money, she noticed that there was also a voice recorder belonging to Jim and an English storybook. After listening to Jim's voice recording, she realized that he genuinely wanted to learn English so he could go to the United States and mend things with Kaya. This made Hannah feel very sorry for Jim. The following night, Hannah attended a party that Phil had invited her to. The party was at Phil's big and fancy house. They spent time together, and Phil showed Hannah his impressive collection of luxury cars. Hannah seemed really happy with Phil. The next day, Hannah felt bad for Jim and decided to help him learn English. She didn't want to get too involved in Jim and Kaya's relationship, though. Hannah went to Jim's workplace and explained why she was there. At his workplace, Hannah met Jim's co-workers, who also didn't know English, just like Jim. She taught them some basic English conversation and vocabulary, and even helped them practice for job interviews, so they wouldn't feel nervous during the real thing. Afterward, they all had dinner together and played a guessing game in English. Everyone was happy, especially Hannah, who had never been so excited while playing a game. Since then, Hannah and Jim became closer, and their English skills improved a lot. One day, Hannah was walking with Phil on a pier, and her high heels got stuck in a gap in the wood, causing damage. Instead of helping her, Phil talked a lot about his wealthy life and family. This made Hannah feel unwell, especially when Phil rudely proposed to her. Since then, Hannah tried to avoid Phil, who seemed really eager to marry her. He kept giving her lots of gifts, which only made Hannah feel more uncomfortable and hesitant about him. When Phil invited Hannah to a party the following week, she came up with various excuses to decline the invitation. Hannah was getting fed up with Phil and let out her frustration on Jim while they were practicing boxing. She accidentally hit Jim so hard that he staggered. While Hannah was teaching Jim, Phil noticed he had just arrived and was on his way to Hannah's class. Phil brought a bunch of balloons and gifts for Hannah, intending to propose again. But Hannah thought Phil had gone too far with his actions. She tried to explain to Phil that she didn't truly love him, but he didn't pay attention and just talked about himself. Seeing this, Jim approached Phil and whispered something to him. Afterward, Phil looked extremely surprised, and he no longer pushed Hannah to marry him. When Hannah asked Jim what he had said to make Phil stop, Jim told her that he had said Hannah was pregnant. In short, Hannah and Jim attended a party organized by Hannah's course institution for students and their parents. Many of the teachers there were from different countries, so Hannah challenged Jim to have conversations in English with 3 people from foreign countries. Jim still had some trouble talking in English with foreigners, but he was confident enough to try and improve. Meanwhile, Hannah had another shoe mishap during the event. She asked Jim to hold her shoes while she gave a speech to the invited guests. Later in the evening, Hannah and Jim listened to a romantic song that made them feel carried away. Jim attempted to kiss Hannah, but she quickly dodged. When they got back to the apartment, Jim felt guilty about his behavior towards Hannah earlier and discussed it with his close friend. Soon after, Jim got a call from his friend, who told him to prepare a job application in English because they were going to conduct an interview for a job placement in the United States. Upon hearing this, Jim hurried to Hannah's place to work on an English job application together. As Hannah was writing an English CD for Jim, Kaya suddenly contacted her through a video call. Hannah asked Jim to sit quietly in front of her while she talked to Kaya. During the call, Jim overheard Kaya telling Hannah that she had changed her mind and wanted Hannah to teach Jim English so that he could quickly move to the United States and repair their relationship. Kaya also mentioned that her new boyfriend was open-minded and didn't mind her having other relationships. Hannah then asked Kaya about how Jim would react when he found out that she was involved with multiple men at the same time. Instead of answering, Kaya teased Hannah and suggested that she had feelings for Jim because she seemed concerned about him. This annoyed Hannah, and she hung up the phone. Meanwhile, Jim had listened to their entire conversation and asked Hannah if she truly loved him. Jim said that Hannah shouldn't have loved him. In response, Hannah explained that her feelings might only be temporary because they had become close recently. When Jim returned home, Hannah was visibly upset, seemingly crying because she had been denying her true feelings. It turned out that Hannah was deeply in love with Jim. The next day, Jim went for a job interview, which went well without any major issues. However, after the interview, he thought about Hannah and their moments together. He made the decision to leave the interview and not pursue the job opportunity. On the other hand, Hannah went to the coffee shop where she usually taught Jim at night. One of the coffee shop staff gave her a voice recorder. After listening to the voice recording, Hannah discovered that Jim had passed up a great chance to work in the United States because he chose to stay with the person he loved. Shortly after, Jim entered the coffee shop and approached Hannah. He sat down and expressed his love for her. Jim had finally realized that he was in love with Hannah and decided to stay and pursue a relationship with her. Meanwhile, Hannah looked teary-eyed, overwhelmed with happiness after Jim confessed his feelings and chose to be with her. So the moral of the story is love can be as tricky as a language barrier, but when in doubt, just pretend you're pregnant to solve all your relationship problems in a hilarious twist.